So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and I really want to thank everybody for taking the time tonight. You all get a bit of a preview of what's going to occur this week in Lake County. Um, the Community Action Lab is all about mobilizing your community, specifically Lake County, for change. We are describing this as building a stronger Lake County. As I was introduced, I'm Edward Erfurt, and I'm Director of Community Action at Strong Towns. For those of you who don't know, Strong Towns is a not-for-profit advocacy organization. We have a website, and we are sending out 2 to 3 articles a day through our website. You may have found it through our blog, through social media. There's lots of content out there for you to learn all different types of things about Strong Towns and about our communities. This messaging has really touched people all across North America, and something that when Chuck goes out into a community, somewhere at the point of one of his talks in the community, somebody comes up and they say, we want to change everything. They found the Strong Towns message, they've connected with it, and they want to share that with their entire community so that they can start to do some change. And this is a fairly new program, the Community Action Lab, and it was really started and inspired by folks in Lake County. There were folks in Lake County that for about 2 years chased Chuck around all over the place. Everywhere he'd show up, they would pop up, these folks from Lake County, and they would say, look, we really want you to come to Lake County and work and share this messaging with us. And Strong Towns wasn't really prepared for that. We don't do consulting work. This is, you guys know all the planning firms that do all this type of stuff. That's not what Strong Towns does. That's not our messaging. But after kind of whittling him down for 2 years, they were able to develop a program that fit with what we do at Strong Towns. And ultimately, what the goal really with this program of Community Action Lab is to change the conversation in the community. So that when you go to public meetings, when you're standing in City Hall, when you're out in your coffee shops, out on the soccer fields, at your barbecues, things like this related to development and how cities function and how we live come up in a conversation. As we've explained to Lake County, who's hired Strong Towns to take this program forward in your region, we're here to help the community think differently. We're pumping out a lot of really good ideas into the community for you to think about it. We are not here to tell you what to do in Lake County. This is an area that we think that as a community, you need to develop a set of principles and guidance in your own community that suits for you. You don't need us to come tell you how to do that. We've also tried to be really clear in the community that this is not consulting. I have a lot of really close friends that work in Central Florida. They work for all of the municipalities there. They do good planning and engineering work. That's not what we're doing. We also were not holding any public relations for the community, so we're not here to defend a project that is going, or here to fight a project that's moving forward. We're not offering technical assistance. I'm not engineering roadway sections. We're not doing stormwater calculations. We're not writing any reports. You all have plenty of reports in Lake County. You can pick any of them off the shelf and proceed with those. We're not giving guidance specific to a project. So we just want to be sure everybody knows that this isn't consulting. This is more of an iterative process. And we appreciate groups like this to allow us to come in to talk about things that are relevant to what you're focused on. So the Community Action Lab, we're taking everything Strong Towns does, and we're focusing it on Lake County. Lake County is one of 4 inaugural communities this year that we are doing the Community Action Labs in. We have Community Action Labs in Norman, Oklahoma, in Chisholm, Minnesota, and an action lab up in Alberta, Canada, in a small community called Medicine Hat. So Lake County is the largest area and population. It's also one of the few counties that we're in. All of our other community action labs are cities of varying sizes. After going through this for about 6 months, I can tell you that you all four are more alike than different. As part of getting this information out, I just want to slip this slide in now. If you would like to learn more about the Community Action Labs, if you go to strongtowns.org/Lake-County, we have a free online academy course that the public can log into and follow a lot of the materials you're going to see here. We are sharing what the Community Action Lab is on this site. We are pumping out articles. We are directing you to content for a broader community discussion. Some of the names here are familiar. I know that some of you already signed up for this. As for advocacy, I would encourage everybody to sign up for this because in the course, there's some questions. Those questions you can write comments in, and it gives you a very direct response back from Strong Towns. We can engage you in that conversation. You can also engage in your community. So we're pumping a lot of information out, and this is a way to share that. And all of our communities, our elected leaders and city staff and county staff members are reading those public comments. So it's a great way to share that conversation in the perspective and the advocacy work that you do. One of the first questions that we kind of brought up at Lake County back in January at our kickoff event is we wanted to get a pretty simple concept out there that a lot of folks struggle with comprehending. It is a fact that a municipal government is a public corporation. If you look up corporation in the dictionary, it is identical to what you have for your municipal government, both at the city and at the county level. So you have a county or commission that is a set of board of directors. Those are elected by stockholders. The stockholders are the citizens. That's all of you on this particular call. As a public corporation, it's formed explicitly to provide governance and a variety of services. So these are the everyday services that we just accept that occur within all of our municipalities and within the city. We asked the community at that time, does a municipal corporation need to run a profit? So this is a pretty fundamental question that got a lot of stark responses from, a lot of visceral responses during our first meeting. So let's talk about other corporations that we may be more familiar with, that we may be able to connect to. And we asked the community, does Walmart need to run a profit? And it does. Walmart needs to run a profit to stay in business. Its revenues have to be greater than expenses, so they can pay their employees, so they can buy their stock, that they can keep their stores operating and running. When we use the term orphanage. This has a lot of different names today, but a facility that takes care of children. So we asked this, does an orphanage need to run a profit? This is a not-for-profit organization. Does it need to do that? And of course, for an orphanage to stay in business, its revenues, how it generates that through income from a local municipality, from the state, from the federal government, from generous donations, those revenues need to exceed its expenses so it can continue to operate and take care of the children within its stead. So we go and we ask, does a municipal government need to run a profit? And a municipal government needs to run a profit to stay in business. Again, its revenues need to exceed what its expenses are. Now, this doesn't mean that we're filling the coffers at City Hall and that we have cash and banks and vaults and bonds and all those things for a municipal government. But every year there are expenses that cities incur that they need to have the expenses to pay for that. Now, if Walmart doesn't run a profit, we know what happens. It closes. But as you go out, if you need to get toilet paper or you need to buy clothing or you need to buy toothpaste, if Walmart closes, you could go to the Dollar Tree, you go to Target, you go to another retailer would fulfill that requirement of what you would need to make those purchases. But if it doesn't run a profit, it closes and we move to the next retailer. We ask the same thing. What happens if an orphanage doesn't run a profit, which is a pretty horrible thing to think about because it's in charge of the stewardship of young children and helping them to raise up and be mature into strong adults. But if it doesn't run into a profit, it's not able to provide that service. And those individuals are then put out and there's no place for them to go. It's more difficult, but the doors can close on that orphanage. But what happens if our municipal governments don't run a profit? And we don't hear about this out there in the community. We hear maybe about the Detroits or incidences in Flint or instances in Mississippi or strange California towns that run out of money and file for bankruptcy. The difference with government that's different than those other private and semi-private entities is that a failed government doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. It just lingers on, kind of like zombies out in the woods. At Strong Towns, we are advocating that municipal corporation must run a profit. They need to run a profit today. They need to run a profit tomorrow, and they always need to run a profit because we always need our trash picked up. We need to make sure our water's running. We need to make sure we have policing. The basic things that government provides, we need to be sure that they're able to provide those today, tomorrow, and always. So I'm going to give a brain teaser for everybody today. So I hope they're ready for the 4-hour lecture on quantum theory for cities. That's about my expertise in quantum theory, is just speaking it off the slides. But we look at these strange math problems and these complex situations, and we start to look at projects that occur all around the country. These are specific to just one area, but they probably relate to things that you see in Lake County or areas that you are familiar with. Here's a local street. It's not a very pretty picture. This is just a plat. It's a dead-end street with a cul-de-sac at the end. It's about a dozen homes along that street. On this particular local project, it's an opportunity for that street to be paved. And the question that's asked is that on that street, what would it take to pave that street? Many of us have been on these types of projects where it's time to pave the street, either go from gravel to asphalt because that's a nicer road surface, or maybe the asphalt road has broken down over years. And you go and you build that road. We ask the question in math of these types of projects is what does it cost for that? And many times we hear communities say, oh, don't worry about that. We were able to assess the property owners for half the cost. So the city has invested half the money to build the road, to pave the road, and we've acquired from those adjacent property owners cash to help repave that. However, these roads have a long-term investment to the city. And if we were to look at what that cost on this particular road project, it was $6,600 per property to pave this road. The municipality was able to get $3,300 from every property owner to get this road paved, meaning that the city, as the corporation, is paying $3,300 per property to pave this road. The question arises is, what is the return on that investment? How many years would it be for those people paying their property tax every year to recoup that investment the city has made on this dead-end cul-de-sac street? When we did the math, it would take 37 years to recoup the money for that investment. So of all the property owners pay all their taxes on time, it would take 37 years for them to recoup that. That's not a very good return on investment. In probably 20 to 25 years, the road would need to be repaved yet again, and we still haven't recouped the money from that. We look at another project. This is probably a little more similar to maybe some of the subdivisions, and it's a little clearer to see. This is a big loop road with a cul-de-sac. It has a lot of properties on it that wrap around it. It's been 25 years and it's time to repave the road. So the road needs to be repaved and rehabilitated. This particular road is only driven on by the residents of this subdivision. It's a closed road, maybe has a gate at the entrance. There's no truck traffic through here. There's no school buses running on it. There's no quick trips through here to another shopping center. The only people driving on this are the residents and maybe the Amazon driver that is bringing products specifically to these residents, to these properties. This particular project to repave the streets was $354,000 of total cost. When we ask how long it would take to recoup that particular amount, that would be 79 years to recoup that public investment from that tax base, from these homes. To break even on this, these property owners would have to have their property value increased by 46%. So their property tax would have to increase 46%. There are other states that are not Florida that probably could push that, and those people would be elected out of office immediately. In Florida, you have lots of subsidies to cap how much money is brought, how fast your tax rates can grow. So there isn't the same growth that maybe some areas are. You also have reductions that you get on your property tax. So projects like this in Florida would take even longer based off of your tax structure. We also looked at industrial development on these types of projects, and there's a lot of these industrial projects occurring in Lake County. And with the action team, they pointed a couple of them out to me, the Amazon centers and some other, maybe Macy's, some other big warehouse places that these are business parks that are funded by and initiated by the local government in hopes that those industrial jobs and industrial users come and build out. This particular example is an industrial park that in Chuck's hometown in Brainerd, Minnesota, they built. Successful park. It built out. People moved into it. It was so successful. There are parts of it that the school district bought land, which had $0 to build there. The city needed a yard for some stuff, so they acquired some lots. It was $0. It was touted by the Economic Development Board as a huge success, and they wanted to mirror this development. So the empty farm field right next door, let's just take the same engineering drawings and just Xerox copy it and reverse it and put it on the other side of the street. And we'll have more lots to do the same thing to achieve this type of development. This particular project, for all that infrastructure, these numbers are old, but they, because you couldn't build this for $2.1 million today. But if we look at what, just with these numbers, you can get the idea of the context. This particular industrial park cost $2.1 million to build. There were $6.61 million in improvements that were induced as part of this project. With everything being put in here in this industrial park, the paycheck from those current conditions, it would take 29 years for all the revenue, every single tax dollar out of this particular site, just to pay down the debt that was put to build this project. We know that not 100% of your property tax goes to paying down debt for the projects that you're in. It's paying for all the other services you have for your city. So to build a duplicate of this, it is a project that's already losing a loss, and the municipality is getting prepared to double down on that loss exponentially in phase 2. We describe this type of development pattern. We call it the growth Ponzi scheme. And if you go to our Academy site, you can, we explain that a little bit more in depth, but I'll try to explain it short here. When new development comes through, this is a project, an initial project anywhere in Lake County. This could be a subdivision. This could be an industrial park. This could be a community building. When we start the development at year one, there's cash flow and transactions. Houses are being built, building permits are being paid, impact fees, concurrency fees, all these are being paid. And from an empty field, there's also property tax. All of this is building up to about year 24. And year 25 is when development starts to show its age, and there needs to be repairs. There needs to be upgrades, repaving, pipes fixed, playground equipment, public amenities being upgraded and refreshed, landscaping changed out. At that year 25, there is now a bill that has to be paid for all of that work, and the cycle starts over. This is harder to see in Lake County because you have a lot of cumulative projects that are ongoing in Lake County. So every year we have those cycles that the next new development comes on board and the next new development, and you guys can name all of these. It's the Lost Swamp, it's the Lost Oak, it's the, they name it after whatever they seem to tear down and call those different subdivisions. All those things go up to a certain point, and then there's a bill that has to be paid for the maintenance and upkeep of those. When we look at this over two cycles, right now, Lake County is somewhere in this section of the cycle. You're building up. We've had the big building booms. 2008, there's a big building boom. More recently, we just had a big building boom. But we're now obligated to make those repairs of those 2004 and 2000 projects. And there's a check that has to be cashed. And then we've exponentially grown. There's another check that has to be paid. So when we go out, there's a point where these transactions cannot keep up with the money going out the door. We're borrowing on a future for everything that we want today. We're borrowing on a future that we assume we will have more wealth than what we are generating today. And we're losing on these transactions. Working with your action team in Lake County, we pulled up a report, how do we grow? This is, by a very reputable group. This is from the Regional Planning Council. We also looked at all of the housing that is proposed. I know that the county is working on this. Believe it or not, in Lake County, there's no one single source that could tell you how many entitled lots and how many platted lots have been approved in Lake County. The county and the Regional Planning Council are trying to tabulate all of that. We went from everywhere from about 40,000 to 1 million. Working with all the municipalities, there's anywhere between 55,000 and 90,000 entitled lots. What entitlement means is slightly different for every single project. Some of these are ready to go. They've gone through all the public hearings and there's bulldozers carving out the land for lots. And some of these have just gone through a process of entitlement, meaning that on a particular property, they have a plan unit development or some sort of master plan and are holding capacity for future growth. When we looked at the reports in 10 years, there were over 12,000 new homes in Lake County. So if all building or if all entitlements stopped, if there's a big moratorium, if the brakes were pumped and stopped, there's about 4 to 7 years of housing supply, what we're estimating based off these numbers in Lake County. That's a lot of houses. That's a lot of development pressure. That's something unique to Lake County that we are working with and trying to explain what that results in Lake County, because it's unique compared to other parts of the country. There's a historic pattern of development that occurs that we see that kind of explains, is very similar to the patterns we see in Lake County. This is an example from Fresno, California. It's not that Lake County is Fresno. It's just that we have a map of Fresno that explains something and shows something that we think we are seeing in Lake County. Development patterns changed in history, and in most recent history, where towns gradually grew out over time. They thickened up, They expanded out. We see this go year over year. There's little incremental bands that are growing onto Fresno that are filling out. We see this pattern go all the way up into post-World War II. Where as a nation, we changed the way that we think about developing cities, where we're expanding out and building in advance of future development. So we're not building for the demand, we're building for what we think that future would be. In Fresno, this is annexations. From the mapping I'm seeing in Lake County, I think that we're seeing similar pieces. And you as residents, just living in Lake County for 5 years, let alone 10 years, you probably are seeing these subdivisions expand out and out and out. They're very low density. They're squirming around different things that are unique, rare, unique species and habitats around Lake County, but they're expanding outward. Strongtown's partnered with Urban 3 to look at this type of expansion in another town. We looked in Lafayette, Louisiana. They're very proud, very conservative town. It would be considered a very Republican, a very red state, very red city. These are folks that mind their P's and Q's and really watch their budget every year. They too went through this kind of expansion process. Through this process, we were able to do a lot of data collection, because what happens when a town expands outward? So we looked at the population from 1949 to 2015. The population in Lafayette, Louisiana grew 3.5 times in that time frame. When we look at that outward expansion, as it grew out similar to Fresno, that meant there had to be more pipe installed to get water to houses further away from the core. In 1949, there were 5 feet of pipe per every inhabitant in Lafayette, Louisiana. In 2015, there was 50 feet of pipe for every resident in Lafayette, Louisiana. That is a 10 times increase of pipe for only a 3.5 increase in population. That's a more expensive system, because all of those pipes have to be replaced every 60 to 80 years. That means you have to have more pressure, more pumps, you have more water in the lines. So you're extending those resources out. We also looked at the fire hydrants, and this resonated with me in Lake County because every street that we would drive on, all of the highways that we would drive around, there'd be vast lands of either zero development, retired kind of agriculture, or cattle grazing. And every one of those farms had 4 or 5 hydrants, one every 500 feet. So there are hydrants there without population in Lake County. In Lafayette, Louisiana, the hydrants per 1,000 people went up 21.4 times from 1949 to 2015. A water pipe to your house is a 3/4 inch line. A fire hose for a fire hydrant is an 8 to 12 inch. So way more capacity, much bigger pipe, more pressure that you need for that servicing. And folks always say, well, we just, we need to look to see where that wealth is. We're in the future. There's much more money now. People make more money at their jobs. There's more opportunity for that. In Lafayette, Louisiana, when the population was expanding 3.5 times, when the pipe work was expanding out 10 times, meaning 10 times more expensive to run that system, when the hydrants were going out 21 times more, meaning 21 times more expensive to operate, the household median income in Lafayette, Louisiana from 1950 to 2015 only went up 1.6 times. So the amount of wealth that is actually in Lafayette, Louisiana did not actually increase, but the cost to operate everything in Lafayette, Louisiana increased exponentially. So there are these powerful incentives that we look at. There's that initial cost to the public for new growth, right? When a new subdivision comes in, or new development that comes into Lake County and any of your neighborhoods, there's zero cost, right? For the municipality, there's lots of money coming in. The developer's responsible for the roads. They make it as wide as it needs to be. They build all the stormwater areas. They build the conservation areas. They build the parks. Maybe they're required to build a clubhouse or community building. All of that is built and paid for by the developer. So that sort of benefit to the budget for new growth is actually pretty substantial, because we've took an orange field that has been vacant for years, and we just went and increased the amount of development on it, and we taxed it. So you have a whole lot of tax money coming in. We have building permits coming in. There's all different types of fees and revenue coming in for infrastructure that we didn't have to pay for. The catch is that in every single development, and we heard this loud and clear in Lake County, is that the public, meaning your cities and your county government, are accepting and agreeing to maintain those improvements forever. And there's some funny things that are happening in Lake County, but I assure you, every new road built in Lake County is the ultimate responsibility for either the local municipality or Lake County to maintain perpetually into the future. And when we talk about that, it goes back to that cycle of projects. So there's some core assumptions that we at Strong Towns are kind of laying out that we need to be thinking about. Either we continue to grow at the pace we're going, and we actually need to grow faster than we're currently growing. So instead of Lake County doing 12,000 units in 10 years, you need to do 24,000 units in 10 years. You need to continue those transactions as fast as you possibly can. We know that's completely unsustainable. We know we're one interest rate point away from a crash like that. We're one development company from a bad PR move to collapse some of those major developers and major builders in your area. Or through the Strong Towns approach, we need to find a pattern of development that ultimately generates more revenue than it costs to maintain. So when we look at the investments that we're making, even though free infrastructure is coming in, is that an investment that can pay for itself? Is that a sustainable pattern forward? In the Action Lab, just to share with you what we have on that Academy course, is that we're asking questions after we kind of share some of these concepts with folks. We're asking things like, what signs do you experience that suggest the community is under financial distress? I assure you, Lake County is under financial distress. Your city engineer has told us you're $50 million in the hole, deferring repaving of new roadways. You're seeing a lot of new stuff being built, so it's deceptive of what's out there, but there's a shortfall on that maintenance that is just being deferred further and further out. You have the boom bust cycles within Lake County. So this is something unique to Lake County. The development community comes in and tells everybody what they have to buy and what they will buy. And then everybody kind of chases after that. We talk about in the growth Ponzi scheme that there is this illusion of wealth. And in Lake County, there's this illusion of wealth of where there's affluence there. There's money coming in. All of your planning departments are expanding. Your building inspectors are getting hired and brought in by army loads. All part of this machine forward of growth. But we know that those transactions are generating results that are less productive. So thinking about that. And then we ask how to respond to this challenge. What are some thoughts you have? The perspective of this group is going to be really important in this conversation because you have a unique perspective that we need to have part of this conversation. Now, I want to share, again, my background's in architecture and urban design, so I can't go without showing some urban design and some development. I want to share the development pattern that occurred, the traditional pattern that occurred in the United States prior to our current development pattern that we see. This development pattern, as I show you, occurred in all of the towns that have incorporated, all 14 that have incorporated in Lake County. they're in some phase of this approach. This is a picture of a town in Brainerd, Minnesota. This is how historically towns developed over time. They were a series of small bets. They were entrepreneurial folks that had no idea they could lose anything. And they would build small private investments, in this case, small wooden shacks along the main street. In this particular picture, there is zero public sector investment in this picture. The city hasn't built a road. They haven't paved anything. There's no utilities to it. There's a bunch of wooden shacks. If the billiard hall goes bad, if people decide they no longer want to play billiards, it's a little bet, it closes. Maybe in this case, the materials would be taken down and moved to a different building, or maybe some other use would move in. If any of these offices change, if any of these uses change, it's no big deal. There's no world collapse on the market if one of these buildings closes out. These are small bets. Over time, this is the same street 10 years later. Those wooden shacks, as they built value and they built wealth for the individuals that had that, they went from the wooden shacks to 2- and 3-story buildings. They started building out of brick and stone. At this point, that wealth started to generate in the community, and they invested, not with a bond, not with a loan, not borrowing from the future, but they invested back into the city. And they built maybe the sidewalks. Maybe they added a fire brigade. Maybe at this point they could afford a police officer. These are investments that are almost cash investments occurring. Those wooden shacks are now being built 1 block away from this street, because the new entrepreneurs coming to town are now repeating the cycle 1 block away. They're building their wealth, so at some point they can afford a brick and stone building. This is the exact same street 10 years later or 20 years after those shacks. Some of the properties have consolidated, they've gone up, they've gone to much more durable materials. They're bigger investments. Now the street is paved. They now have stormwater and sewer and fresh water for these buildings. All of that infrastructure has been added after the private investment. They were added because that private investment built wealth that could afford to spend on these amenities to support that. And now the brick buildings are 1 block out and the wooden shacks are 2 blocks out. We create a graph to show this type of development pattern. Traditional development patterns are the line on the top is the private investment. These are the private individuals that are making investments in this community. We see this like in railroad towns, like they built the train stop. Throughout Lake County, you had boat shipping areas, you have rail stops that were out there. That investment was built by a private individual. It then led to houses and shop fronts and warehouses being built in. And we can see this incline of private investment. And every year, the private investment is making more and more and more. It begins to expand out to this top of the bar. At the bottom, we can see the dash lines. As these developments are occurring, those private individuals are reinvesting back into the city through property tax. So they're wooden buildings, so let's get the fire brigade out there. Let's make sure we have a fire department so we don't lose any buildings. Now we've got some more stuff happening, fresh water, being able to flush a toilet in a building is a pretty good idea. So we'll invest in that. Also up to the point that we start to invest in the large civic buildings. And if you go to any of the small towns, incorporated towns in Lake County, you see these civic buildings. They weren't built off of bonds and loans and promises to the future. They were built out of the wealth generated on the ground. Lake County is currently following a different development pattern. This is what Lake County is building first. The government is coming in and investing first. The infrastructure is being built first in preparation for other private investment. And in this case, they're set up for as many left and right turn lanes. You probably are going to have a march of 1 million people every other week here with your sidewalks and bike trails. You have all of this stuff that you've invested today on. This is not isolated to this one location. There's maps and maps and maps all over Lake County of all the places that roads are going to go in and get wider and bigger, and bike trails and sidewalks and all of this infrastructure. If you notice, all these colored lines are all around vacant land. They're being built in hopes that the private development comes in. This is what's coming in behind it. We're building miles and miles of stuff as a result after we make those investments. That suburban experiment that we're in right now, that we have been studying and exploring and testing in all of our cities since the end of World War II, is a much different graph. The dashed, this is what we're investing from the public sector today. We're dumping all of our money to build all of the highway interchanges, the toll roads, the wide intersections, the new water and sewer plant. We're running miles and miles of pipe out to all the hinterlands all over the county, day one. Shortly after all of that is built and the engineers sign off on it, the county accepts the roads and the Florida Department of Highway blesses it. Then you start to get stuff built. The first things that are being built are your Walmarts, your strip shopping centers. These sort of malls are coming in. They're not very productive, but they're built there because that's the stuff that's attracted to these new investments. Once those businesses come in, then we start seeing the fast food, because now we're driving everywhere. We get those again. We still haven't made it up to the point of that public investment. We've run out of money on the public investment. So you see, we can't invest anymore. We're hoping that things come up to it. All of these transactions are occurring year after year, day after day, and we're still not getting up to the return on investment. If I compare these two charts of what the traditional development pattern is and the suburban development pattern, they're very stark. They're inverted. The pattern on your left, the traditional development pattern, is one that builds wealth. It's a sustainable pattern. It's the way that we've developed cities for thousands of years. This is how our grandparents knew how to build. We did some analyses in Lake County. We found your most productive areas are those kind of blighted areas in town. When I say blighted, these are the ones that your municipalities have identified as community redevelopment areas. Downtown Leesburg, downtown Claremont, portions of Mineola, Groveland. These areas were all built with the pattern on the left. As soon as you get out of that walkable area and you hit the 4-lane, 6-lane, and 8-lane roadways, you switch to that suburban experiment. This is where all of our wealth is actually going, and we're not getting a return on that investment. There's a series of graphics that with a group that we work with called Urban 3, where they do a value per acre analysis to show us visually where our most productive areas are. This is Buffalo. I'm showing you Buffalo because we have data on Buffalo, but Buffalo has been a declining city up into just this last year. Buffalo has a core downtown with all of the suburban experiment around it. There's certain areas where they took parks and neighborhoods and bulldozed them for those private investments of public investments of highways and big transportation systems that separate it from the waterfront. And they converted parks into highways, thinking that that would be an investment in the city. What Urban 3 does is they take the value per acre, the amount of tax revenue that's being generated on the property, and they calibrate it value per acre. The tall spikes in purple and red are where there's an enormous amount of wealth being generated out of that plan. Those are businesses and properties that are generating far more than their weight in what they need to be supported within Buffalo. All the green areas are areas that are either neutral or costing the city money to operate. So that urban core area is what is subsidizing the sustainability in Buffalo. We've done this analysis with Urban 3 all across the country. We've looked at suburban towns. We've looked at New England towns. We've looked out west. We've looked in California. We've looked at where big private investment projects were being built on the edge. We've looked at the smaller communities. We've looked in the Midwest. We've looked all over the country, and the same thing occurs again and again. There are areas that are highly productive in all of these areas. These highly productive areas that are developed, this goes back to Lafayette, Louisiana. On this particular map on the data, we put another layer in. The areas that are purple in spikes, these are areas in the town that are generating more revenue than what it costs to maintain and operate those. The red is showing you how much is needed to subsidize those outlying areas of the city. So if you have a very high red spike, that means that you are not only not generating enough to support yourself, you're having to be subsidized by other areas of the town to fund the everyday operations in your part of the neighborhood. In Lafayette, Louisiana, this is not a very rich community. The area you see in blue here is actually a very poor area. In Lafayette, Louisiana, it's a swamp. If I'm poor and I want my home to survive all of the natural functions that occur in the world, I'm going to build my house on high, dry land. That's traditionally where this was built. If I talk to you about Lafayette, Louisiana, and about where we think, there's lots of new development and shiny new things happening in Lafayette, Louisiana. Again, a very proud town. These are images of the most productive areas in their downtown. This is their downtown. These are the residential neighborhoods. This is not what we might expect. This is not, I don't think we're all going to jump and get on a plane and go to Lafayette, Louisiana to visit their downtown. This is not going to be in Southern Living. This is not the neighborhood they're going to show. But this is a very vibrant downtown. This is actually, we did this analysis, assuming that neighborhood to the bottom, right there, the single family neighborhood, was getting all of the services that they needed for upgrades on the roads and trash removal and code enforcement. So if we actually took all the deferment into it, their spike would be 4 or 5 times what you see. The area on the left are probably images that are familiar to you that you could relate to, the places that you might see in Lake County. These are the areas in red that are spiking. These are the suburban corridors, the large wide roads, the big intersections. These are the new subdivisions on the edge of town. These things actually cost Lafayette, Louisiana more to maintain than what they are bringing in. At Lake County, you're very blessed. You have a lot of talented folks working in county government. We asked the county engineer to work with the mapping and GIS office to do a heat map, and we did kind of a inexpensive shorthand version, looking at where productivity is within Lake County. So this is in the Academy course. You can blow it up or you can email me and see these areas, but you can see the red areas are places that are highly productive. They're generating revenue. They're in the historic cores of all of the towns within Lake County. These are places that are generating immense amount of revenue in Lake County. The green areas are not generating that much revenue, almost $0 per acre for property tax. We wanted to look at these patterns, and we started to look with the action team. And on the left, coming from the Regional Planning Council, here's a map showing all the growth in Lake County. So those pinks are all the places that development is occurring in Lake County. People are investing and they're building roads, they're putting houses in, they're building Walmarts, they're building convenience stores. All those things are happening. When you overlay that to the map on the right, there's some stark differences. There's pink areas on the left that are not showing up on the right as productive revenue generating communities. If you look, there are areas, entire areas that don't even show up, meaning the old orange fields and cattle groves were more productive than some of these new subdivisions. These new subdivisions, unlike the cattle fields don't need police service. As much as we want to train cows, they'll never use a toilet. They're not going to ask for one. They're not going to complain about stuff. They're not going to show up to public meetings. Every one of these new subdivisions, it's that suburban experiment where the investment has been made both by the municipality and the private developer in here, making all those investments, waiting for the private investment to come up. What's interesting in this is that 2017 was the last time that map was updated for growth and development. We know it's wider, but I also know that you've been in a building boom. So all of the tax revenue would be evident on the map on the right, because that's based off of this year's numbers. So things are being built and not generating those revenues. Again, in some of the analysis that we're looking at that asking questions about illusion of wealth, and we're Lake County, where you start to see that. Now we're showing you guys have seen kind of behind the curtains, so maybe you won't be able to unsee it. But if you start to think about in Lake County, there's lots of places that look fancy, shiny, and new in the county. There's lots of new things happening. But if you go to Lake County or you go to some of your municipalities, there isn't money to do the projects, to build the parks that you want, to invest in the upkeep of the parks and the roads that you currently have. There's probably shortfalls in utilities. So they've deferred some utility stuff to future time. There's lots of liabilities that you can see, and questioning where those and who should be paying for it and how they should be paying for it. And I'll leave a little teaser in there to go to the academy. We talk about a good party or bad party. I'll leave that as a teaser so you all can go and learn about that in that course. So there's some implications that are out there, and these are very serious implications. And this is why we're trying to work to shift that conversation in Lake County. The mechanisms that we have for growth, we have been accustomed to and we want. If I go to any of the municipalities, I've talked to all the city managers, there's a common thread in all of these that if we're not growing, we're dying. That's a common thing you probably all hear in Lake County. You probably wouldn't be around as an organization if there was sensible growth, because there's not things to be threatened of that. And what you're getting in return, not only is a fiscal thing, but some of the long-term liabilities that are occurring with that, the things that are being lost, what's being built is less valuable from an environmental standpoint than what's being put in. All the local governments are being forced to absorb the costs of all these development patterns. Every single one of them, we're finding it in their budgets. I'm having some very good conversations with some of the city managers. I hope to share some of that because we need to see it. They need support from the public to know that there are things that we need to change. We also have to recognize that this can't be done with our current development pattern unless we are willing to do large tax increases or large cuts in services. And I don't hear that. I don't hear anybody in Florida raising their hand saying, please let me pay more taxes. And I definitely have never been to a community where people say, well, that's all right, we can cut back on our services. I don't need, I can have electricity every other day. I'll only flush the toilet between 3 and 5. It's just unheard of. We've grown to accustomed to a level of service in our communities. We also are sharing some things with the action team, and we share this in the academy course of looking at where investment is occurring in Lake County. I love this diagram. Your finance director in Lake County should be commended for this. This is one that they're using every year, so you can go back. The numbers change slightly, a little bit, a penny or two every year on the different pieces. But on here, every dollar you all are paying in property tax, which is probably a dollar too much in most citizens' opinions, only 27 cents of that is actually going to the operations of the county. So this doesn't include, I'm sure this matches up to all the cities. If you're in a city and are paying that additional city tax, it probably runs out about the same. So really great graphic. But when we look at where Lake County is focusing that revenue and your tax dollars, when I look at budget allocations and we add up where every cent is going for in this, there are two numbers I'm looking at. The first number is, what is Lake County investing in growth? What are they investing to attract new business through economic development? What are they investing to have building inspections, to have plan reviews, to process all those land development plans? What are they using to pay the CRAs to go and redevelop and attract growth? What are the bonds that they're paying back on? So all that economic development, all that permitting, all that debt service is 11 cents of every dollar that you all are paying in your county tax. That's your ad valorem specific to Lake County. What about maintenance? We're building out, we're expanding out in this illusion of wealth. When we look at that, there's only two line items on this whole thing and all these numbers as public works and engineering. And public works and engineering have told me that it's less than this because they have other tasks they have to do the maintenance. It's really closer to about 3 cents of every dollar. But you're spending 220% more investing in growth in Lake County than you are in investment in the maintenance of everything that you currently have. You're focused on the transactions into the future. You're focused on that Ponzi scheme of continuing to grow because you need those everyday transactions to increase revenues to fund the promises that have been made in the past. At some point, that cycle is going to stop, and it's going to be very jarring in Lake County. We have grown more than we did in 2008 with the Great Market Crash, so it could be worse. But this is just some of the stuff that we're diving in and working with your action team. Now that I've bummed everybody out, let me just share some things that are out there that we ask people to think about, and they're probably familiar with you. You just aren't recognizing it. And we want to encourage that in all of these towns. This is stuff that average citizens can advocate for and share. There is a traditional development pattern in Lake County. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It also provides a very reliable path to freedom from all the troubles we've gotten ourselves into. We did an analysis of value per acre in Claremont. There's a vacant lot between two kind of rough houses in downtown Claremont, right in the middle of CRA. It's a vacant lot. We compared that. It's like a 50 by 100 to a 50 by 100 house. Really nice 2-story in a new subdivision. The vacant lot was 3 times more productive than the brand new house. So we've got to invest where those revenues are up and the most productive places. There's a movement out there. You probably have all seen it on the TV shows, the tiny house movement. These are cute. They're, these houses that can be built, maybe a 1-bedroom, it fits on a tiny lot. Maybe it's on a tiny house on a big lot. My grandparents call this a house. My architecture books up until 20 years ago called this a house. They're very difficult to get in most of your zoning codes. You've banned them out. Or if you put them in, this tiny house, this small 1-bedroom house, this 500 square foot home, that's a starter home that could probably be built with cash, could recover somebody after a storm, could be an entry level project. You have to ask special permission to build this. You have to go through the same building permit process that if you built a 5,000 square foot home. So same permitting fees, same months of processing to get that through. In some zoning codes, you have to go and genuflect to the planning commission. You have to ask permission from 12 people. You've got to jump on 1 foot. You've got to hope that no neighbors come out, and then you don't dare tell them that you have an interest in doing backyard chickens. And then you're granted the permission to build this house. We need to allow more of this. This is probably the size of many sheds or pool houses in many of your properties. So allowing this to occur within the traditional neighborhoods is an easy way to build wealth, value, and prosperity in your communities. There's an example of projects of allowing bottom-up chaos. This is kind of a managed chaos condition. This is a project in Michigan. This is a resort community. The demographics for this is probably where all of your Michigan friends in Central Florida, this is probably where they're in the summer months, where it's cooler in Michigan and then Florida. Their Main Street building burnt to the ground. It was dilapidated. It's a giant hole in the community. For about $25,000, their redevelopment agency bought 14 sheds. These are the sheds you see on the roadside. They're easier to do in Michigan than Florida, but I know you can buy them. They'll meet all the hurricane standards in Florida. They put these in. They're just under what most of the building codes are. They're private businesses, entrepreneurial folks that go in there for the seasonal months. It's very cheap for them to go in. It's only a couple hundred square feet. There's an air conditioner in the back. They're limited to like 3 people at one time in it. It activates the street. This is so cherished, they can't even relocate these now. Very low risk for entrepreneurs to come in. In the 7 years that they've been with this $25,000 investment, they've had, I think, 2 or 3 businesses. They couldn't make it through the whole season. They normally have about 8 or 9 more applicants to be there than they have chalets available for them. Their turnover season on season is not because a business failed. It's because they got their footing here. They learned how to make a business and they moved to the brick and mortar buildings up the street. They built an economy with a small investment of low risk and a lot of chaos. At Strong Towns, we have to tell you that we need to respond to how people use the city. I use these examples because there are many times I've shown this, and you go into the city engineer and say, I think we need a sidewalk here. And the transportation engineer goes, well, Ed, why would you say that? These are things we humbly observe in our communities where somebody struggles. We know that they want to walk here. We know a business wants to open. We know somebody wants to move into a home in our communities, and they're not able to get into that bar of entry. We promote and advocate a public investment process that is a really simple 4-step process. Many organizations use something like this, but we ask folks to humbly observe where people are struggling within your community. With that, we ask the question, what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that problem? When I talk to municipal staff, I have to tell them not only what you can do right now with your department, but it has to be done in 24 hours. Otherwise, they spend weeks planning and figuring this out. There are many, many things that we can do in our communities that are very quick, low cost, straw bales on the street, paint on the street, doing stuff on a front porch, turning a parking space into some more productive use for outdoor dining and cafe spaces. Not all of these are going to be perfect. Not all of these are going to be winners, but it's such a small risk investment that it becomes, if it's a failure, it just goes away. We move the straw bales, the paint, we power wash it off. If it's a success, it's a minimal investment with a huge reward. And as we do this, we can repeat these projects again and again and again. I threw this slide in because this is like many, many of the streets that you have in Florida. I think you finally are getting away from these 5-lane dieways. These are the streets that are called complete streets. These are the overplanned streets that take years to do. Traffic's flowing through. They've got the decorative street lights. They probably have street banners that come out on the 4th of July. They've got sidewalks and street trees. These occur everywhere. This is not a productive street, and this took years to do. There's a project in Memphis called Broad Avenue that we like to share. This is a tactical urbanism project where a citizen group went out over 2 blocks and converted this old streetcar abandoned neighborhood with paint and straw bales and a festival over a weekend and transform this downtown. They narrowed the lanes up. They provided places for on-street parking. They provided places for people to ride bikes. They provided outdoor dining areas. They made crosswalks safe again. They actually went, Memphis is such a poor town. There's not enough code enforcement officers to go around, let alone building inspectors. So they went to all the abandoned shops and opened them up and did the very minimum they had to do to get them operating as a shop for this weekend, as pop-up shops. Lots of risk, lots of chaos, but it's for a weekend. This investment, very minimal investment. In Memphis, they started to map it. They got very smart people in there. Following this, on these 2 blocks, they had 29 property rebuilds and renovations on a street where they saw 0 investment prior to this project. They saw 50% increase in rent, meaning their businesses were thriving. They could generate wealth and value. They could get people into spaces. There were 25 brand new businesses that opened up in Memphis. There was, they measured over $15 million in new investment on this street. Memphis has now gone in on this particular street after they figured everything out and put permanent paint down where that weekend festival had stuff. And now they're doing the straw bales and the house paint and the tactical stuff the next 2 blocks down the street. As that becomes the prosperity builds like this, the city is investing in the permanent infrastructure, and they're taking the temporary stuff and moving to the next 2 blocks. I think they're about 8 blocks now down on Broad Avenue in Memphis. Memphis isn't like Lake County. It's not growing. It doesn't have the wealth that Lake County has, but by these small bottom-up steps, they've been able to do a lot. Again, I want to share the Community Action Lab site. If you go to strongtowns.org/lake-county, you can get to the Community Action Lab site. You can there are a couple ways to interact with us. You can share your email. We will email you. We're doing 1 email a week. We're not there to sell your emails. We're there to communicate with you. We're sharing each week something for you all to think about and point you to some articles. We'll also tell you when we have events happening in Lake County. On each of these, if you want to go a step further, we have this free course. In about 20 minutes, you can see all the content we have. It's videos, podcasts, articles, pictures, provocative questions. There's an opportunity for you to add comments to it. So it's a way to engage folks. When I checked last, we have engaged on the ground over 200,000 individual engagements through social media. We have about 60 or 80 people that are engaged on the Academy that are providing comments and reading through this stuff. So we want to be sure that you get out there. Again, you can find us at strongtowns.org/lake-county. That gets you to the Action Lab site specifically for Lake County. So my email is edward@strongtowns, and I probably misspelled it on that slide, strongtowns.org. You can reach me at any time. That's how this kind of came about. You had some very good advocates that said, hey, can we get on a phone call and talk? After I talked to them, I said, we have a bunch of friends that need to hear this message and want to participate. So we're happy to engage in that process to share this, because this is about a conversation. It's not about consulting. It's not about doing reports. So that's what I have. I've talked a lot. I hope there's some time. I'd like to answer any questions, particular activities that are occurring in Lake County. I have dates.
Edward, I want to thank you very much for this really illuminating presentation. I also want to remind everybody of the town hall meetings that are coming up. Tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock at the Claremont City Center is one. And then on Wednesday night, 6 o'clock at Venetian Gardens in Leesburg. So I believe the agendas are similar for both the town hall meetings, correct? So choose one or the other.
Yeah, and we've also, through the advocacy of the LCCC, we have actually set aside an additional time between 8 and 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning. We're going to be at the Lake Technical College Institute of Public Safety. I'm not sure where that room is at, which room we're in, but let me see, room 302 in that. So I've never been there, so I'm going to find it like everybody else. We'll make sure you get there. That is a stakeholder 90-minute session with Chuck Marone and myself, specifically focused on environmental advocacy.
And that's 8 a.m., correct?
It's 8 a.m. So you guys are bright and early. We have, if you're a developer, we have a developer session at 10. If you're involved in the community redevelopment agencies or the Main Street program, we're doing a similar session at 2. So these are intended to be a lot of question and answer, not a lot of presentation. But as you're thinking about these items, especially if you go to the first evening's talk, there will be a lot of things that we are throwing at you that may take a while to click, or you may have a question. What happens to me is I go home, I tell my wife what happened, and she asks me questions. I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. We've tried to create those opportunities to have that on the ground. And we're reporting that back to Lake County, the municipalities, and the action team as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Susan now and see what questions we have in the chat box.
Okay, great. Well, I'll take the privilege of being the question person to make a couple quick comments of my own first. Edward, when you were talking and you were showing those 2 graphs about the traditional development pattern and then the suburb development pattern with the dotted line, about 4 minutes before you said it, I typed a note to Jane that said, I'm guessing that Lake County's dotted line here is flat at best. And then you showed that graph showing the flat line. And we really have been feeling that, and you really put our feelings and what we're seeing happening into a very specific chart, which is very helpful.
Yes. And what's happening is that outward spike, you haven't bottomed out yet because you still have money coming in. I was told by the county today, I was double checking. They're short 50 million on repaving dollars. That's in the budget. You can find it. It's kind of buried.
The county commission's been saying that for 2 or 3 years, but yet they still keep kind of kicking the can down the road.
But you have probably $100 million worth of roads that the city is now proposing to build. If you go to the county engineering site, there are all these road connections. I know they're important. People need to get places, but these are 4-lane roads with bike lanes and Wellness Way is one that came to mind. And the number they told me for the landscape install that the county's responsible for would blow your minds. And then it results in an additional sort of stormwater area to have water to irrigate it. And then on top of all of that, the county is going to be responsible to maintain not only the road, but all the landscaping forever.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that's happening too, I would be a good to comment on, is that they're also taking this money that you say should be coming into the county to provide the infrastructure and the landscape management, but they're starting to isolate that and lock it into the subdivisions by adding special districts on top of the subdivisions, which skip the whole municipal government process and are answerable to the state at best. And so the money for the people, the homeowners that are paying taxes, is just going to stay only in their subdivision.
Yeah, I mean, all that that's doing is just increasing the taxes for that particular community. And I haven't found an HOA that residents are ever happy with. But what's happening in Lake County is that a lot of your municipalities have realized that they cannot continue accepting all these roads. They've done the math that we're showing at Strong Towns. Groveland's having a big debate about this now. They've got 2 or 3 developments coming in that they know they can't afford to maintain the roads, and these roads don't connect anything. It's like 1 way or 2 ways in. They know it's not productive. So what their thought is to help fill the gap is just to have the residents pay more through a special taxing district.
Right.
All that is going into a fund that just deals with that maintenance of the roads and maybe the landscaping. We still haven't talked about policing, fire, utilities. If they're asking for money for the roads, they need to ask for funding for all of the other services they provide And what we're finding in our analysis with the county is that your core historic areas, I saw there was clearly a blighted project in Groveland. It was, as you came into town, the barbed wire chain link fence, all the cars piled up, the repair garage that never repairs anything. It's been acquired by the CRA. It was actually one of the most productive parcels in all of Groveland. So the decisions we're making of what we're taking off the tax rolls and what we believe are non-productive sites are not. I
Yeah,
mean,
that whole area that's called like Festival Park now used to be a neighborhood not too long ago. So, okay, then so I have a question. Here's the question from one of the groups. It's like, when you define a strong town, do you include a town that values conserving natural resources and addressing climate change?
yes. Yeah, so that means a whole lot of things for a lot of different people. When we talk about a sustainable community, it needs to be sustainable in all aspects. So as a municipality, municipalities, their best resource is the finite resource they have of land. And they're making decisions of how to use that land into the future. So we have to have human habitats or places that humans have to be. And we have to have all the habitats for all the other stuff that we need as well. So we really have to balance that in a sustainable way. When we talk about the party analogy, it's probably what most of you see. There is a piece of land that when something gets developed there, it takes away, it's less than what was there before.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to be able to point to places that are new developments or even infill developments within Lake County that you could say, when that got built, that contributed more to the community than what it put in. That brought more people to this location, that enhanced the business that I wanted. I would like to see more of that. And we've got to allow that thickening within our existing areas where we've already extended our resources in those areas before we start reaching out to these far reaches and consume vast areas of land.
Right. Okay. And then the topic that comes up in our group all the time is the idea that we have areas in our county that are designated as rural protection zones, but the pre-allocations for the annexing in the ISBAs completely have obliterated our rural protection zones, which is going to really impact our quality of life moving forward. Does the Strong Towns have any suggestions or plans for that or ideas for that?
Yeah, I think you need to raise that up and share that with the elected officials because between us, talking to many of the elected officials, they are looking for excuses to say no on certain projects. There's certain developments that they know are not sustainable from a fiscal model. I mean, they're looking at dollars and cents as the fiduciaries of their city. And we use dollars and cents. We use those analyses because they're agnostic. You know, they're like either it makes a dollar or it doesn't. It's assessed by an entity and we can map it. Like there's no question about that. So that's where they start. But they also are saying, you know, is this really, do we really want another one of these in this area? Is this the highest and best use of that particular land? I think talking to those municipalities of where these problems are is part of this conversation. Even some of the developers are looking at ways it is getting more and more expensive for them to do the sprawling developments that you see, the stuff that has been approved and coming out of the ground now. It's very expensive for them to do that. Every mile of pipe, every foot of asphalt is expensive. How do we get back to a more sustainable model that's where we're building incrementally over time, adding a mix of uses, whether you want to call it walkable or compact, any of those sorts of things so that we are responsibly using the resources and the land we have.
Right. That ties into a lot of what we hear in our meetings is that the developer will come with this proposal for this very dense subdivision and people will say, oh, we don't want that very dense subdivision. And they'll say, oh, no one buys the homes of 1 acre. But we don't know this. We haven't built anything that's not like a dense subdivision in so long. It's like, but they're like, oh, okay, another dense subdivision. And
Yeah.
we need better ways, and you're getting us in that direction, better tools to communicate that maybe the homes 1 per acre is what people want and is better in so many ways, or whatever that.
It's not. I worked for a redevelopment agency in Martin County. So there's a lot of folks with your same passion that I met and dealt with in Martin County. So you're dealing with not only Okeechobee, you've got all the lake discharges, we've got coastal areas. Environment was the top in that area. And working in the redevelopment areas, I was focused on thickening up the previously developed areas of the county. So let's
Sure.
fill where there's empty lots before we do new stuff.
Right, exactly. Like, and the one big thing Lake County has is, you talked about tiny homes and the success of that, but their development codes don't even allow any home under like 850 square feet. Just
Yeah.
no.
What I did, and I've done this in every jurisdiction going forward, is I needed to measure the market. I needed to know, I couldn't rely on housing developers, they're like car dealers. I'm not gonna go to Fiat and hope to get a pickup truck. Like, I'm gonna go to Ford or Chevy and get a pickup truck. If I want a cargo van, I'm not gonna go over to Honda. Like, they can only sell you what they produce, and they know how to produce the best product within that realm. So when when all those big builders are coming to you, they're telling you the only thing that will sell is the product they are selling.
Yes.
So in those communities, what we would do is I would hire the same market analysis company that would do the market study for the residential for my city. So whoever the private developers were choosing, I would pick that company. You've got a couple of really good ones right in Central Florida. You get a housing study, and all of a sudden you realize that in that, yes, there is a market for 1 acre ranchettes or farmettes, the big houses. There's that market out there. But then you realize that's only 10% or 2% of the market. And then you find that the compact walkable, I mean, the beauty, think how many people go out to Lake County to go to Mount Dora for the weekend.
Right.
And Eustis and all these places to get that old Florida charm. When they go to downtown Claremont, they want that authentic feel. What you find is that there's a large market segment that wants that housing type and that type of location. And you say, okay, well, maybe it's only 30% of the market, so it's not a big part of the market. There are no developers in your community that are providing it. So it's 30% of a zero market. It's an exponential demand for that. We just wrote an article about Winter Garden and their downtown. I know what they told us from the regulatory side. They're not dickering with developers and builders anymore about their development standards for their downtown. This is what it is. You're going to build in a compact way in our existing area up to the street with our architectural standard. You're going to do everything we want. And there's no pushback to it. That's just the way it is.
Wow, good for them.
When you have infinite amount of land, you can't leverage that.
Mm-hmm.
But in these municipalities, by understanding what the market is or where the market is at, setting a clear vision, make it easier to do stuff in town versus on the edge. We're finding that that's attracting the development there. And that is how you build the wealth. You build where you already have made the infrastructure investments.
Right. Okay. And then I have one more question here, I think. Brittany says the same thing. Don't hear a lot of mentions of rural areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how they factor into the health of our county. So she's mainly concerned with protecting rural communities where cities are rapidly annexing and pockmarking rural areas of development. I can think of one particular one that's 12 miles away from the downtown area, and yet they're having to run 3 miles of water and sewer to get to it. Am I right in understanding that the rural land is more productive than these isolated developments?
Yes. Yes. So what we're seeing on your mapping is that rural development, it doesn't have as many transactions, so it's perceived as not valuable, but it has no demands on services. So when it comes to what it is producing, a vacant, dilapidated orange grove in Lake County is going to be more productive than some of your subdivisions. Now, what's even more disheartening is that 3 miles of water and sewer. You all are paying for that. You're subsidizing that. There is no difference as ratepayers in Lake County for distance or proximity. So if you're right next to the water plant, you're paying the same rate as the one that has to get water pumped 12 to 15 miles out to their house. And then all the sewer has to be pumped back through 15 pumps back to the treatment plant. And this is something that your development rules are equalizing bad development and good development in Lake County. So it's not just, let's not squander the land. It's not just those expenses. I suspect, I just saw this in Alberta. We were looking at a development, 6 houses, 2 miles away from everything. And it was, the developer was going to do these grand schemes. There's 6 houses. They're paying $30,000 a year to service and above and beyond those 6 houses in that community.
Okay.
I suspect if I did analysis in these neighborhoods, you're going to find $30,000 to $40,000 subsidies for these subdivisions that you as the ratepayers are paying. And that doesn't take into account the maintenance, long-term maintenance, that when that pipe rots and nothing gets built along it, somebody's going to have to pay for it. It's going to make those asphalt examples I show you look small.
Yeah, and they use a lot of economic justifications, these subdivisions that Brittany specifically mentioned she was concerned about. I heard the relevant city commissioner saying we have to do this to revitalize our mall because our mall is our economic engine and it needs to get revitalized. And I'm like, these places that they're using these justifications for do not match.
I ran your mall.
Turn the malls into something else.
The mall that's there in Claremont is generating on property value the same as your single family houses.
The mall in Leesburg, I think, is one they were talking about. Leesburg one.
That one's worse.
Yeah, and they keep giving tax breaks to it and using it as justification to build these distant subdivisions.
Yeah, that stuff you're losing for every investment on that. We can see it. So if you go to the county maps, all your tax bills are public record. They're easy to find, and you can take the what it's appraised and value per acre across it. And we're finding all of these. If you're in an incorporated area in Lake County, your property ad valorem to city and county is anywhere from about 4,000 to 9,000 per acre. That's what we're kind of seeing, that range. Most of your commercial outside of the urban cores are less than that, way less. So it's not as productive, and the stuff that is perceived as productive is even less than what you need to continue as a municipality.
Perhaps we should think about wrapping this up and ask if is there anyone else who was not able to put a question into the chat box that you'd like to ask your question?
And if I missed your question, I have copied everything from the chat box. I'm sending an email to Edward.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment or ask a question? You could raise your hand and then unmute yourself.
Whoops.
And Jane, can you see everybody?
Edward, I accidentally muted you. Sorry, or yeah, there, thanks.
Well, I'm available.
I want to thank you very much, Edward, for this great presentation and discussion. We really, really appreciate this, and we will see you later in the week.
Yeah, I will be arriving tomorrow. I hope you all can make it out there. If you have other questions, email me at edward@strongtowns.org or go on the Academy site and put some comments in. There's more ammunition there for you all to learn, because you're definitely on the right track. And let's help shift this conversation in Lake County.
Okay,
Edward,
great.
thank you so much for being so accessible.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye-bye.
Great, thank you.
That was awesome.
was really, really awesome.
That was some
know,
very specific stuff we needed to
Yeah.
hear, and he really
Yeah.
helped me condense our into something actionable and solid.
Right.
Absolutely.
I hope I hope that PowerPoint's on the site, because that's some good data. And we could probably replicate it here in Lake